Good evening, everyone. It's now 6:30, and I call to order the regular meeting of the Victoria City Council. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on the agenda tonight is the announcements. The council will hold a workshop on Monday, September 26th at 5 p.m. to review and discuss the downtown parking data. The council will also hold a workshop on Monday, October 24th at 5:30 to discuss our 2023 legislative priorities. All meetings of the City Council are open to the public and held in the council chambers at City Hall unless otherwise noted. We encourage anyone wanting to attend our council meetings or workshops in person to contact our city clerk in advance. In other announcements, there's still time to visit the Victoria Farmers Market, which runs through September 22nd. Join us on Thursday afternoons from 3 to 6 p.m. in the Lower Enki Brewing parking lot. The Victoria Fire Department is hosting its annual community open house at the Victoria Fire Station on September 26th from 5:30 to 8 p.m. Stop by to watch fire safety demonstrations, enjoy a fire truck ride, and learn from our public safety partners. The Victoria Fire Department is also hosting an American Red Cross blood drive on September 20th from 12 to 6 p.m. The blood drive is held at the Lions Pavilion. More information can be found at the Victoria website, the City of Victoria website. And the League of Women Voters of Eastern Carver County will be sponsoring a candidate forum here in the Victoria City Council chambers on Wednesday, September 21st at 7 p.m. So join us for that as well. The next order of business is to adopt the final agenda. Council, can I get a motion to adopt the final agenda?
Motion to adopt the final agenda.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now it's time for open forum. This is the opportunity for anyone to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda and not an application form that will be coming to the council at a future date. No one has registered in advance to speak, but is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council? Anyone that would like to address the council? Seeing no one, we'll move on to our next item, which is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are routine, administrative, and do not require deliberation, or are housekeeping items required by law. They're approved with one vote unless someone requests an item to be considered separately. I would like to pull off on the consent agenda 5.6, the assignment of agreement for Downtown West Phase 1. Dana, does staff wish to pull any consent agenda items?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Any other items from council? Anyone in the audience interested in pulling something from the consent agenda? All right, we will pull item 5.6 for separate discussion and vote. So council, may I have a motion to adopt the rest of the consent agenda item, please?
Motion to adopt the rest of the consent agenda items.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 On to item 5.6, removed from the consent agenda. The reason why I pulled this is I recall having this discussion earlier this spring. So Ms. Hardy, can you tell us a little bit about why it's back on the consent agenda?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So yes, we did take this, probably does look familiar to you. We did discuss the assignment this spring back in May at our May 9th meeting. During that meeting, you had authorized staff as a result of those discussions to enter into negotiations with Marco McLean Development, develop a purchase agreement and development agreement for this project. So what we want to do there, although council took action, we didn't actually have you sign anything. So we thought as things go forward, we wanted just to memorialize the action that you took and have a written record of the actual assignment. So it does meet your consent policy guidelines. It's not controversial in the sense that you've already taken action on it. But thank you for pulling that and giving us the opportunity to clarify for the public.
Perfect, thank you. With that, then I would make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are now moving on to our regular agenda. Item 6.1 is to consider approval of resolution for the preliminary tax levy for the City of Victoria for collection in 2023 and adopting the preliminary 2023 general fund budget. Presenting this evening is Assistant City Manager Tricia Pollock. Welcome, Ms. Pollock.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. This evening, we will ask the council to consider the adoption of the maximum tax levy. This will be our meeting that is required to do that adoption before the deadline, the state deadline on September 30th. All right. So at the last workshop, council approved the following recommendations. There was a few proposed fee changes for 2023 in the fire, rec center, parks, and building divisions. Also, the Southwest Transportation Alliance membership was approved by council for $2,500, and also the EMT training for new hires in the fire department for $8,500. Charitable gambling fund expenditures for the fire pavilion and skate park were also approved by council. So these changes resulted in the proposed max tax levy amounts of $7.4 million, which is 11.6% more than the 2022 levy. And the tax capacity rate would be 27.72%, which is a decrease in comparison to the 2022 tax capacity rate by 3.5%. And then the general fund 2023 budget shows a preliminary 23 budget revenues of $7.5 million, expenditures of $6.3 million, and transfers of just under $1 million. There would also be an addition of $266,000 to the fund balance in order to meet the 30% requirement of the following year's expenditures. The 2023 preliminary tax levy then would be $6.2 million from the general fund, the debt service levy of just under $1.2 million, and then that results in a total levy of just under $7.4 million. So the 23 tax impact shows changes from 22 in the net tax capacity of about 28.3%. And then again, that tax capacity tax rate would be decreased by 3.5%. The median valued home went up 11.5%, and the tax on the medium valued home would decrease just slightly over 1%. We're looking at the year-end estimated population to be about 11,800 people, and the tax per capita of $625. Our long-term financial plan, looking out to 2030, projects that our tax capacity rate would be between 27% and 30% each year. The 30% general fund unassigned fund balance would be maintained, and this is based off of projections of 2.95 persons per household, increasing that population from 11,823 to 14,700 in 2030. Also, that increase in the households from 3,573 to 4,581 in 2030. We base our long-term financial plan estimating 3% inflation on expenditures and also a 3% increase in revenues. And the market values are estimated at 2.5% each year. So does council have any additional questions before approving the 2023 max tax levy and preliminary general fund budget?
Thank you, Trish. Council, questions for Ms. Pollock? Seeing nothing new here.
Okay,
This is all work we've already
I
done,
know,
so.
it's not your first time setting your eyes on this information, I understand. So the next step would be the two resolutions for your consideration.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor.
Council, if there's no further discussion, I will take a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve a preliminary tax levy for the city of Victoria for collection in 2023.
Do we have to put an amount on that?
We probably could for, if you want to modify or somebody make a friendly amendment.
What's our number? Our max
Or
tax
is it
levy is,
Percentage or?
Okay, I can go back to that slide.
approving a preliminary 2023 levy of
$7,390,428,
all right.
11.6%.
All right, we have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item 6.2, a public hearing on amending the,
There's a second one.
There's a second.
my apologies. Council, can I get that second motion?
Resolution approving a preliminary 2023 budget for the general fund.
Perfect. We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second?
Do we want to add the number in here as well?
Mayor, members of the council, you wouldn't need an amount because the budget would, include the revenues and the expenditures. It's all inclusive.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second by Councilmember Roberts. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we're free to move on. 6.2, a public hearing amending the Victoria Business Subsidy Policy. Presenting this evening is Community and Economic Development Director Jen Brewington. We'll give the staff a chance to swap seats here. Ms. Brewington, welcome.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight we're here for a public hearing for our Victoria Business Subsidy Policy. So just a little bit of an overview. The purpose of the Victoria Business Subsidy Policy is to establish a criteria for granting of business subsidies, which would include any financial assistance such as tax increment financing, tax abatement, or other programs that may be available through the city or other organizations such as DEED, which is the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. A business subsidy policy should be used when considering public financing for private development and shall be used as a guide in processing and reviewing applications for public financing. The request for a business subsidy must also meet a public purpose. So examples of public purpose would be a project that would enhance the value of surrounding properties, stabilize the area, or foster a sense of community. The project would also anchor a desired commercial development in the city. The project would stimulate additional capital investment for future development, and the project would assist in the orderly growth of the city and generate significant economic development. Minimum qualification, so all projects receiving a business subsidy from the city of $100,000 or more per the act would be required to follow the city's policy regarding prevailing wages. For all projects receiving TIF or tax abatement assistance, the developer must demonstrate to the satisfaction of the city that the project is not financially feasible using the but-for test. The project must be consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and zoning ordinances, and the developer must provide adequate financial guarantees to ensure the repayment of any public financing and completion of the project. The criteria for a business subsidy would make sure that there's an increase in tax base. Jobs and wages are important, so it would create at least one full-time job, and that full-time job must pay at least 175% of the federal minimum wage. Other goals would be other than the jobs and wages. So something that would help remove or remove any blighted areas. The proposed subsidy must also result in improvements to public infrastructure or public facilities such as storm sewers, streets, parks, and other city facilities. The proposed subsidy must remove any physical barriers to the development of land, such as poor soils, bedrock conditions, steep slopes, or other similar problems. The compliance and reporting requirements would be that a public hearing is required for every business subsidy granted to the city that exceeds $100,000 or for which a hearing is otherwise required by the Act or other laws. Every business subsidy must be approved by the Victoria City Council. Every recipient of a business subsidy must enter into a business subsidy agreement fulfilling the requirements of the Act. And both the business subsidy recipient and the city must comply with reporting and monitoring requirements of the Act. So we are asking today that you approve the Victoria Business Subsidy Policy that is presented through the staff report and presented today. Any questions?
Perfect, thank you. Council, questions for Ms. Brewington?
I have a question. How do we quantify the increase in tax base? Is there a target? What is that?
Oh. Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Rivera, members of the council. So let's just use an example. We'll use Bethesda, real life project that's here, and a question that came up during that project a couple years ago when that was going through. Bethesda as a nonprofit organization was not subject to paying taxes, so that project would have been not generating any taxes. But through the TIF agreement, we were able to collect taxes. They agreed to pay taxes through that. So that would be an expansion of your tax base where you otherwise would not be receiving taxes. That's an example of a current project and how that worked. But that could come in various forms. There's an exercise when we're going through whether it's abatement or TIF assistance. So we work with Tammy at Northland. She would give you a more technical response than I can. But anecdotally, when we look through the different performas, if you're doing TIF, there's the but-for test. There's all these things that need to occur, and one of those things is you're looking at what the long-term value. So if something today exists and it's $1 today, but they're going to invest $100 in that property, you're going to get more for taxes on $100 than you will for $1. So that again would constitute an expansion of your tax base. So there's some mathematical formulas that we can do, just math, figure out. But policy question for council is how much expansion. That's for you all to say, yeah, that feels right, or that meets our goals X, Y, and Z that we have in our strategic plan, any visioning things, anything like that you have. At some point in the future, you could talk through adding some additional criteria to your policy to say, to put some more quantification in there. It will expand your tax base by X percent. Those are things, goals that you can add or not, right? Because it also puts you in a box, but that becomes the policy question for you.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers
no,
it
answer
a
my
little bit,
question.
but
Yep.
All right. Council, other questions? Okay, seeing no further discussion, I will take a motion.
I make a motion to approve the Victoria Business Subsidy Policy.
I'm sorry, we need to do a
that
public
it?
hearing.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is a public hearing.
oh, okay.
We've been off for 2 weeks, so.
We're a little out of practice here. So this is a public hearing. So at this point, I will now open the public hearing. So if there is anyone in the public who wishes to speak on this policy, please step up to the podium. All right. Anyone who wishes to speak to this item? And one more time. Now, seeing no speakers and no further council discussion, now I will take a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. The public hearing is now closed, and I will take a motion to approve the Victoria Business Subsidy Policy.
I make a motion to approve the Victoria Business Subsidy Policy.
Perfect. We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on. Item 6.3 is considering adoption of amendments to the Victoria Zoning Code Section 20, off-street parking and loading, and approval of resolution for summary publication. Presenting this item is Senior Planner Isaac Peterson. Mr. Peterson, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Bear with me as I pull up my presentation. Thanks, Trish. So yeah, Mayor, members of the council, this evening, the council will be considering adoption of a proposed amendment to the city's required parking regulations. Just to provide a little bit of background, as the council is aware, on July 25th, you all reviewed and provided conditional approval regarding the Downtown West Phase 1 development proposal with a preliminary plat and conditional use permit. At the time of the Downtown West Phase 1 preliminary plat and site plan consideration, the site as a whole did not meet the existing multifamily parking code requirements provided by code. And as a result of that, the general consensus and recommendation of the Planning Commission and Council, the Council included within the project approval a provision that the site and project meet a future adopted code amendment specific to multifamily parking standards within the Downtown West portion of the Central Business District here in town. So subsequent to that, the council directed the Planning Commission and staff to develop a parking ordinance amendment in kind for Downtown West to facilitate the project's conditional approval. And since that time, at the end of July, the Planning Commission has been reviewing and discussing and developing an ordinance amendment during their August 16th and September 6th Planning Commission meetings. And that's what we're reviewing here this evening. So just to provide a little bit of site background on the project that's kind of motivated this in part, the Downtown West Phase 1 development site is a 145 dwelling unit apartment building that consists of studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units in a mix. There's currently 178 structured underground parking spaces located off-street to serve the proposed apartment building. As you may catch, there was 177 parking spaces before. The developer's been able to find one more parking space within that structured underground parking area just by moving some pillars and finagling the orientation of how different columns are set up within the parking deck.
Okay, so just a question.
Sure.
They didn't change the size.
Councilmember Beck, Mayor, members of the council, the proposed stall widths are, there's some flux, but they're anticipated to be within the city standard of 8.5 by 19 or 8.75 by 19 for the width, but yeah.
But there's some that are less? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying there was another parking stall found just by
Moving
changing the
columns?
orientation and of how things are physically laid out within the parking garage, but it'll still meet city code. And then, in addition, there's 98 public parking spaces proposed within the Downtown West Phase 1 site improvements as a whole. surrounding the proposed building. Of those, 47 of which are shared public parking spaces that are located immediately adjacent to the Downtown West Phase 1 apartment building. So as the council may recall, there is a parking demand study that was done in conjunction with the project. The parking demand study noted that 1.33 spaces per dwelling unit was the identified parking demand for the proposed building, which would result in 194 total spaces. Again, there's 178 structured underground parking spaces on site, 16 less than the anticipated demand. Therefore, there is a request to utilize, shared parking spaces that are being constructed in tandem with the building located off-site that are public shared spaces. So just to provide a little bit of background on what our existing code is, Section 20-6 governs the city's parking requirements for off-street parking and loading. Currently, the code requires that 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit, one of which to be enclosed, is required for multiple family development proposals and projects. In addition, the code currently excludes or prohibits the shared use of publicly available shared parking spaces for residential land uses. The proposed project is a residential land use. Therefore, the request for utilization of shared parking spaces could not be considered given the city's current code. So with that in mind and the intent and what was heard, really the drive for the proposed code amendment was to delineate a separate multifamily code requirement within the downtown west portion of the central business district due to some concern around parking within the core of downtown Victoria. To do that, staff worked with the Planning Commission and identified 2 distinct different subzones, and that amended text is shown in green on the screen before you. And it identifies a subzone A, the downtown district, the greater portion of the central business district, and a subzone B, which would be the downtown west district. Subzones can be incorporated into code. It's not quite an overlay district or a new zoning district per se, but it would be 2 different areas of parking requirements that could be identified within the city's zoning code. And that would be graphically adopted into the code by reference. So before you on the screen is a map of what that would look like, where the central business district is denoted in red as a subzone, and then the subzone B, which is hashed out in white here, would be that distinctly different parking district within the proposed amended code. And further on, again, to facilitate what we're looking at here, there's some minor amendment to Section 20-7, which conflicts with the proposed ability for shared use of public parking spaces adjacent. So it'd be for clarity with the intent of the proposed amendment. And then in addition, because we're identifying a new subzone and the council's direction was not to incorporate the code amendment within the whole of Victoria, but rather just the downtown west area, a new column within the parking standards nomen graph or scheduled off-street parking nomen graph is proposed to be added, noting a multiple family downtown west district subzone B. So the area of where in land use that it applies to. And then a new provision which notes 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, one of the 1.5 spaces to be enclosed per unit, deviating from the city's typical standard. I would note within the proposed text amendment that was included within your packet, we lost our hyphenated 1, before the meeting, and I just want to make that clear. That was my error. It's proposed, and it's supposed to relate to a note which notes that available shared parking immediately abutting a subject site can be utilized to accommodate required parking spaces pursuant to the city council's approving a request to utilize shared parking as provided in section -20-7. So I want to make that clear. It wasn't intentional, but if the council makes a motion of approval on this tonight, I would make the note as presented rather than as attached to the agenda packet due to that error. That 1.5 parking space per unit requirement was discussed at length with the Planning Commission, and there's different alternate code amendments. It was found to be appropriate for downtown West through that discussion and conversation. So as it would apply, and as the proposed code amendment would apply to the Phase 1 project that you all have been looking at recently, it would necessitate a total of 218 parking spaces to serve the site, and it's 145 units, which would require a request for shared use of 40 public parking spaces located immediately adjacent to the property in order to comply with the code provision. There are those parking spaces immediately adjacent to the building, some located on street along Stagger Lake Lane and some located within the central green area to the northwest of the building site. Of those 40 parking spaces that would be requested for shared use, demonstrated proof of parking for shared use to serve the building, overnight use of 16 of the shared parking spaces would be desired, consistent with that parking demand study that was done in recognizing that there could be demand for 16 shared parking spaces to use overnight. So with that in mind, the balance of available shared parking as a whole for downtown West Phase 1, not the whole development area, would be 51 shared parking spaces in the area as a whole. So, just because we're looking at a few different things in kind of odd timing, based on the code amendment, if approved, the developer would then be required to enter into a shared parking agreement subject to the city council's review and approval. So just want to be clear that the city council would not be approving a shared parking agreement for that project tonight, rather just the proposed ordinance amendment if considered. So again, just relating it back to the recent project that we've been looking at, denoting where there's some shared parking spaces. So along Steiger Lake Lane, there will be 25 constructed parallel shared parking spaces. Then there's an additional 21 that are located next to the development site that would likely be requested for shared use to comply with the proposed amendment. And then there's a section of the Central Green where there's currently 26 proposed public shared parking spaces located next to the building site, of which 16, staff would anticipate that 16 spaces would be requested for allowable overnight use through a shared parking agreement if pursued. So the Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on September 6th regarding the proposed amendment and heard comments related to the proposed code language. Concern was raised by one resident regarding overnight use of shared parking spaces. Ultimately, the Planning Commission recommended that the City Council approve the proposed ordinance amendment with a 6-1 vote. And again, staff is comfortable and would recommend approval of the proposed ordinance amendment as presented. With that, Mayor, members of the council, I can stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I would, the concern raised by the resident regarding the overnight parking, what was there any more
Yeah.
specifics around that concern?
Yeah. Mayor, members of the council, I believe the concern related to the city's management of potential overnight use of parking spaces, particularly as it relates to street parking. I think that also extended use of the central green by the resident that was at the public hearing. And just the principle of allowing overnight parking in a shared public parking space. Staff does feel confident that the logistics and administration and enforcement of shared parking use in this scenario can be determined and vetted well through a shared parking agreement that's enforceable, though.
Terrific. Council, questions?
Nobody? I have some.
Councilmember Black, please.
Okay, so in July, we said we approved the preliminary plat, conditional use proposal subject to conditions, and that it conformed to the parking requirements of a future adopted parking ordinance amendment. I've looked at this, I've looked at how you started, where you had some surface parking near the entrance in the back, and you had some in the front, but that's all gone. So it looks like, it was my understanding you were going to provide the additional parking when the amendment was voted on, and I don't see where you could put parking other than use the city parking. Is that correct?
Are you addressing that question to Mr.
The
Marco?
developers?
Mr. Marco, Mr. McLean, welcome. Mr. McLean, are you going to
It's
take
like, where
that
did your
one?
parking go?
Yep, Marco McLean Development, Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for your timing. The initial, I think what didn't translate through in the initial concept plan is that parking would have been exclusively under the footprint, which is a far more cost-effective way to do it, but it would have yielded far less structured stalls, far less stalls on there, because what we lose with the angle in the building, you only get kind of parking under the footprint of that building, and then there was a handful of stalls out there. Part of the major reason why we reconfigured the whole building was building from that parking plate up. So we maximized that parking plate, which now extends way outside of the building, so we're not losing, you know, some surface and drive lanes and all that kind of stuff. We have one big area underground we can optimize by, like senior planner said, by moving columns around and striping as best we can. We continue to find stalls in that way. But by working with the dimensions of the actual site and making that parking plate kind of extend to those dimensions is how we got to the 178 below, working within the boundaries of the master plan.
Okay, didn't you say you were going to have parking underneath the pool as well?
We actually just moved the pool outside of the footprint of the parking, because that would have ultimately taken parking away from the garage.
Okay. So you don't even have any room in the front of your building?
Not within the boundaries of the current master plan, we don't.
So where's trash going to pick up?
Trash is gonna be held in the garage and then moved outside of the door. The trash company will come up to that entrance. They'll roll it out, load off-site, and then come out of the driveway.
And then the deliveries and that type of thing, are they going to come in the front door?
Yeah.
So what about the yard people? Where are they going to bring their equipment?
I mean, they'll park on the street or park
On the
wherever
street.
they need to unload their equipment, but just like any of our neighborhoods or residents, I'm sure you have neighbors that have lawnmowers come, it's just
Yeah, they park in the
orderly
street.
business.
Okay, so, but basically you just want the 16.
Yeah, and I would say that's what complies with the ordinance, which we're, very supportive of. I think the 16, as we're gonna handle in a shared parking agreement, I think there'll be a good opportunity kind of to start to get into the logistics of making sure that we can be eyes on as far as helping enforcement. I mean, there's a lot of alignment when we were talking about the site planning commission from the standpoint of it's a delicate balance. You don't want human nature, if you offer ample on-street parking, people are gonna use it, right? And so we wanna fill up our garage, keep all that activity off the street and everything like that, but just offer enough for a little bit of convenience, you know, limit the overnight, and then provide kind of eyes-on enforcement to not ever have a circumstance where someone is, you know, vis-a-vis San Francisco, parking a car there for 3 months and never moving it because you can't find a stall. We gotta kind of strike that balance. So we feel confident that we're gonna be well parked. It won't be an obtrusive overnight scenario, and then we can start talking about, you know, how does it make sense to handle maintenance? I mean, that was one of the primary concerns about the on-street parallel, was making sure that there was a convenience access, kind of access for maintenance, especially snow removal, right? And so that's priority there. So that's why the 16 kind of designated overnights would go up in front of the building there, and then we can start to work through, I think, details in the shared parking agreement on how does it make sense for us to work in cooperation on, you know, maintenance and O&M and things
Okay,
like that.
for the underground parking, is that going to be included in the rent, or are you going to charge for that?
It is going to be included in their rent.
Okay, good. All right.
Councilmember Black, anything else?
No, I think I'm okay right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions or discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to adopt the ordinance amending City of Victoria zoning code section 20 off-street parking and loading as presented, and approve a resolution for summary publication of the ordinance.
I've got a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is item 6.4, consideration of the sale of a portion of the 13.5-acre site owned by the city. Council, the Minnesota statutes allows us to go into closed meeting to develop and consider offers or counter offers for the purchase of sale or real property. I'm looking for a motion on whether we want to discuss item 6.3 in closed session. 6.4, my apologies. Thank you.
Motion to enter into a closed meeting.
I have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. For those of you who are with us here this evening or watching us at home, the meeting will now go into closed session in a room adjacent to the council chambers. Council, necessary staff, and the city attorney will meet in closed session and return to the council chambers when finished to reopen our meeting and provide a summary of the closed session as required by law.
Mayor, just one comment as we go into closed session. Actually, the transaction contemplates both the sale of a small portion of the city's 13.5 acres, but also the exchange with a small portion of the Boyer property. So we need to identify both properties, and I just want to make that record for you.
Perfect, thank you. So noted. And now, while we're in closed session, our video will display a splash screen indicating we'll return shortly. So we will now go into closed session. Can I get a second? All right. Welcome back, everyone. We need a motion to reopen the meeting. Council, can I get a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is item 6.5, consideration of approval of the purchase and sale agreement between the City of Victoria and Marco McLean Development. Presenting this evening is Community and Economic Development Director Jen Brewington. Ms. Brewington, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight, we're going to discuss the purchase agreement for the Downtown West parcel. So the city has received an offer from Marco McLean Development LLC to purchase 1.10 acres of the existing 13.5-acre site owned by the city. Lot 1, Block 1 is proposed to facilitate the development of the proposed 145-unit apartment structure. Outlot A is proposed to be retained by the city for future phase development within Downtown West property. Outlot B is proposed to be retained by the city to facilitate the creation of roadway and stormwater infrastructure, as well as a central green open space and shared parking area. Some of the conditions, so on the closing date, the buyer, Marco McLean Development LLC, shall pay to the seller, City of Victoria, $900,000 to purchase the property. The buyer shall have until April 30th, 2023, the due diligence period, to approve and conduct any investigations, studies, or tests desired by the buyer in buyer's sole discretion and at sole cost and expense. The buyer shall have until April 30th, 2023, the approval period, to seek all approvals and permits buyer requires for buyer's intended development and the use of the property. Prior to the closing date, the buyer and seller shall, at shared cost and expense, plat the existing parcel and the adjoining land owned by the buyer as Downtown West. Buyer and seller shall negotiate and finalize the terms of a development agreement associated with tax increment financing of buyer's development plans. The buyer acknowledges purchasing the property as is, where is, and with all faults, and in reliance upon buyer's own studies, investigations, and due diligence, acknowledging that it has inspected or has the opportunity to inspect the property. The buyer and seller shall deposit with escrow agent all funds and documents necessary to perform and complete the purchase and sale of the property pursuant to this agreement. Now, staff is recommending that you execute the purchase of the agreement, and I'm here for any questions that you
Ms.
may have.
Brewington, thank you. Council, any questions? Seeing none, I will consider a motion.
Motion to execute the purchase and sale agreement between the City of Victoria and Marco McLean Development LLC.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. There are no more items on the regular agenda this evening. We'll now move on to reports and emerging issues. Attorney Vos, you're up first. Anything to report?
Mayor and Council, I do not. Thank you.
Ms. Hardy, how about anything from staff?
Nothing from staff, Madam Mayor.
Council, anything from the council this evening?
I have a couple of things.
Councilmember Black, please.
Sorry.
Oh, don't be sorry. Good stuff.
I just wanted to bring attention for our seniors on the Juniper website. They're having from September 19th to 24th is Fall Prevention Awareness Week. And it has different things online via Zoom to get strong, increase balance, feel good, prevent falls, because, we don't want to do that. And for the tots, one of our residents and a neighbor, Len Olson, has started Toys for Tots Victoria, and he's been working very diligently, talking with the businesses downtown to get boxes for distributing the toys, and I'll be updating you on that. He's very ambitious. He's trying to get 2,000 toys.
We can do it.
We can do it. Victoria's really, really good about that, and he's started a page on Facebook that you can join to keep up with the events, and then as we get closer, I'll update you a little more.
All right, thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Black?
Oh, that's it.
Perfect, thank you. Anything else? All right, I would just add that I understand the Volksfest was a great success and a lot of fun, so we want to say a public thank you to the Victoria Business Owners Association that pulled that off for us, and I hope everybody had a great time down there. I was out of town and unable to attend, but I understand it was a grand success.
Yes, I could hear them all the way at my house.
All right, there are no more items to come before the council, before this body this evening, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned.
Okay.